Good morning, everyone. Is the microphone working? Well, how about back in the booth? Thumbs up, fantastic. We're so excited to welcome Monica Laurence. Monica has been a Silicon Valley tech startup CEO, a CMO, and advisor. She has influenced and shaped over 50 startups. Through the Mavericks Game newsletter, global community coaching and retreats, she inspires leaders to operate at their edge with excellence and joy. And she also teaches people how to be lucky. So, with no further ado, Monica Laurence.
Thank you so much, Erin. It is such a pleasure to be here, and it has been an absolute joy to be back on the Bucknell campus. I haven't been here in decades. I don't know why it took me so long to come back. But because when I walk the campus now, I'm just reminded of all these special moments, memories, classrooms that I sat in. And to tell you the truth, I have a bit of awe for the young woman who enrolled here. You know, we do that for ourselves. We stand on the shoulders of the people we once were. And that's how we get to the next level. And I know that's true for me, and I'm celebrating that today, and I know that it's true for all of you. So if you happen to hang out at Bucknell all the time, fantastic. If you're like me and you're coming back, then just savor those moments and all those memories. Today I'm going to share some tips with you about how to stop paddling through life and how to start surfing. I suppose that I was destined to come to these insights and this way of thinking about the beauty of our world because I now have a place in the Fiji Islands and we're all about surfing and kiteboarding and playing in the water. So today my talk is titled Going the Distance, Stepping into Your Creative Power as an Entrepreneur. And I'm going to give you the spoiler right away. Here's the secret. Oh, am I going backwards? Simply commit to the joy of the journey. That's the most expedient way to navigate with excellence and beauty, enthusiasm, incitement through our multidimensional quantum world, which we're going to talk about today. So just commit to finding the joy in every moment. I kind of think of us as being on a hero's journey. You know, when you're watching a film, the protagonist doesn't start out as the hero. Like if you think of Luke Skywalker, and I have quite frequently because I worked at Lucasfilm, he doesn't start out as the hero. He's kind of run-of-the-mill average guy. And then he has these experiences. He has trials, tribulations. They're not particularly easy. But in meeting those moments, he transforms. He becomes the hero. And that's what we're doing all the time. We're all becoming heroes. So when I say commit to the joy, I mean even during trials and tribulations. Even in those moments, ask yourself, how am I becoming the hero here? Because if you look, you'll see the gift that's on offer and how you are transcending that moment into becoming more rapidly, more beautifully, the hero you are. And that you are. Of course, you're becoming, but that's because we're experiencing life as a sequence of events. But somewhere inside, you're already that hero. You're just experiencing the story of how that version of you, your best version, emerges. So you've gotten the secret. Now we'll dive into the detail. Thanks to Erin's introduction, you know a little bit about me. I'll tell you some detail because I've been reminded of that detail being here on campus. For any students who are tuning in and listening to this presentation, what I would share with you is that you don't have to know where you're going. It took me like 3 different tries of majors before I landed on computer science. It wasn't obvious to me. And I pretty much had to fail at the ones that I thought were my calling. What I love about computer science, and this is kind of an unusual way to think about the practice, is it's both logic and beauty. There's an elegance to it. There's an artfulness to it. And that art was always important to me. When I first came onto campus, I saw the art building, and I was reminded of all the hours I spent there, sketching, designing. So we all have these very varied experiences. And those have been so important to me in the trajectory of my life. In fact, I was sharing with Jody over dinner, night before last, that I had been enrolled in French classes throughout middle school and high school. And I came to Bucknell and I got very involved in all the requirements for my major. By the time I was a junior, I thought, oh my gosh, I have not spoken French. I have to take a French class. And so I went into the head of the French department and said, I'd like to take a class in French. I said, wonderful, well, you can take the beginner class. I said, no, I don't want to take the beginner class. I've been able to read in French and speak in French, and so I would like to take a 300 level class. This is not possible, Monica. But eventually they said, okay, it's up to you. You're welcome to join the 300 level class. And of course, I had to work extra hard to really excel in that class. But then what happened 2 years later? I graduated from Bucknell. I joined Accenture, and I was assigned to the Paris Stock Exchange. And why is that? Because I was a computer scientist who spoke French. So when you have these nudges, and you're like, I don't see how these dots connect, just know that if you allow yourself to be drawn by what you love, that all of the pieces will come together over time. One of the pieces that has been a touchstone for me is the Fiji Islands. My uncle moved to Fiji in 1972. He was my idol. And if you had an uncle like this, you'd probably be your idol too. He's a very successful entrepreneur. He did a roll-up of cable television stations in San Francisco. And then he sold it. And he felt a bit burned out. So he took a trip around the world. And when he got to Fiji, he stopped. He met a guy in the bar, which my uncle would tell you was the place that he used to hang out a lot in. And this guy said, I have an island for sale. Would you like to see it? I said, sure, let's go take a look. The next morning, they flew out over this picturesque island. Got back to the airport. My uncle said, "Great, I'll take it." So I grew up with a maverick uncle. Someone who broke all the rules, broke all the norms, had dreams, went for them. And he showed me that anything is possible. He also gave me a huge gift, and that is my connection to Fiji. So when my life was changing rapidly, like 15 years ago, and I was spending more time in Fiji, at some point I got to a crossroads, and I said, what's next for me? And I had this intuition, a little voice, maybe you get these sometimes, and that voice said, you're going to go to the north of Fiji, and you're going to buy a place of your own. That's what this place is. This is Tavola Villa. It is my private villa resort in Fiji. This month, I'm celebrating 7 years of having acquired this beautiful 8-acre plot that overlooks Savu Savu Bay. I would invite each and every one of you to consider coming at some point. Maybe, Erin, we could even do a little innovation advisory gathering in Fiji. But know that you're always welcome at Tavola. And I just dropped in here some accolades that we've received, because what we're building there is something very special. A place to come home. A place to come home to yourself. A place where you belong. And belong in a way that it's hard to imagine a sense of not belonging. It's more than tourism. It's really a place for rejuvenation, for innovators, entrepreneurs, creators, all of you and the people who are making our world fantastic. So please come home anytime. I'll quickly pause here. There's a lot of ways that you can learn more about me and the work that I do. An easy way is to subscribe to my weekly letter, which is called The Mavericks Game. I publish it on email, also on LinkedIn, and every week I talk about a tip for how to be lucky, how to advance and scale your startup, kind of really combining these areas of entrepreneurship and sometimes what would be considered mysticism. This week's issue of the Mavericks Game is all about how to be rejection-proof. So that's what you'll find when you get there. And I was inspired to share that story because my son, on his gap year, decided to challenge himself. He was living in Australia, and every day for 30 days straight, he decided to embarrass himself. He sought out opportunities for public humiliation. And then as a social scientist, he just watched how he was reacting. What were the physiological responses? He watched other people. How did they engage with him? And why did he do this? Because he felt that he wasn't operating at full capacity in social situations. And he wanted to conquer that fear. The craziest things he did. He went to a theater and watched a film, and at the end, he stood up to start a standing ovation. Of course, no one does that. That's not how we act in films. Another time, he put up a sign on the corner and said, I'll sing you a song. I said no one wanted to look at him until a child came along with mom in the stroller who desperately wanted Christian, my son, to sing a song. Or the evening that he took a jar of ashes to dinner and asked passersby to photograph him and grandma. I share this story, and I wrote about it in the Mavericks game this week because it's so inspiring, Like we all have these points of reticence, these times when we don't feel like we're quite fitting in. And to decide that you're just going to launch a game, create an experiment where you will be a different person at the end of that experiment than when you began is really, I find, so inspiring and a fun way to kind of plow through sometimes these blocks or frictions that we're experiencing. So that's a little preview of what you'll find if you decide to subscribe to the Mavericks game. I have a curriculum called Quantum Surfing. I'm going to explain the curriculum to you today. About 12 years ago, I had a series of what would be called awakening experiences. Maybe you've had some of those yourself. Experiences that were completely otherworldly. Experiences that there is no explanation in our cultural way of thinking about how reality works. But because I had a string of these over the course of a week, and because I am kind of a scientific thinker, I thought, we don't understand how reality works. And I became fascinated with truly understanding it. If you went to another planet, if you were on a mission to Mars, you'd say, tell me how reality works there. What do I need to survive? And then how do I thrive? But we don't think about our world here like that. We're kind of handed a playbook that is really quite antiquated, and then we make do. And we think that we understand how it works. But in fact, our quantum physicists started talking about a multidimensional quantum reality 100 years ago. All of their algorithms and discoveries have ignited our technological revolution. But our day-to-day hasn't changed. And what I want to share with you is some insights into how our multidimensional reality is working so that you can not only survive, but that you can thrive. Okay? So quantum surfing is a revolutionary method for success by actualizing a sea of potential. It consists of 3 modules, and I'll just quickly show the curriculum, and we won't go into each one, but in today's conversation, from each module, I will share a gem with you, so that when you walk away today, you are already navigating in a way that is thriving, and that you are being more lucky. Okay? All right, so course number 1. In our world, we primarily focus on actions that engage with nature. So we do, we grind, we plan. Right? This is the area that we are involved with, primarily action as it relates to our surroundings. But there are two other areas that we have access to. The next is mindset. Now, mindset in a lot of our popular culture right now is about how to be resilient, how to still engage with nature. And this is very important, like being in a growth mindset. But there's a more significant invitation to mindset, and that's to better understand the true nature of our multidimensional quantum reality. Because when you adopt that mindset, you start to experience the world in a different way. And then finally, intuition. Intuition is how we engage with consciousness. Consciousness is a sea of information that connects everything. And we tune in to that consciousness. It doesn't exist inside the brain as much as all around us, and we experience it. So we'll talk a little bit about intuition today and how to ignite that for yourself. Quantum Surfing 1 focuses on the intersection of action and intuition. How to be lucky. The reason I start there is because adopting lucky behaviors gives you an immediate outcome. And so it's an accelerator into this engagement with our reality. Quantum Surfing 2 is about balancing. So you get on your surfboard by becoming lucky, and then you balance on the board by adopting ways of being in alignment. Then finally, the focused life. You're up on that board, you're surfing, you know how to balance, where are you going? So that is the third quantum surfing course. When you pull all of these together, you ignite yourself in creative power. This is a creative life. This unleashes the creator within. Okay, going forward, and thank you to the magic slide switcher. All right, Quantum Surfing 1. To surf quantum, you have to shift your energy to being more playful, inquisitive, and aware. And we do this by learning how to be predictably lucky. And that's definitely fun. Number 2, balancing on the board. Once you've mastered lucky behaviors, you learn to stay up on your board. And that is by establishing a felt sense of alignment, with integrity, honing your intuition, and clearing old patterns. Okay? So you're becoming an expert surfer who doesn't keep falling off the board. Okay? And finally, in Quantum Surfing 3, you learn to be a conscious creator in our quantum reality. Here we talk about groundbreaking concepts in quantum presence, how to choose your waves, and how to maneuver artfully to surf toward your target. So becoming a pro surfer. All right, that's a quick little overview. And the point of quantum surfing curriculum is to stop paddling and start surfing. So let's start surfing here and now. Number 1, getting up on the board, which is, as we know now, how to be lucky. Now, why is lucky the thing? Let's take a look. So there were 3 mathematicians and physicists in Italy who wondered, what drives success? Why is it that When people are born, we have a normal distribution of talent. And yet, if we track them over a 40-year career, we end up with a power law distribution of capital and success. It's no longer a normal distribution. And why is that? So these mathematicians and physicists created a mathematical model to explore this question, and they ran it over long periods of time. And what they realized is that there is only one factor that explains the shift from a normal distribution of talent to a power law distribution of success. And that factor is luck. Now, this group won the 2022 IG Nobel in economics for these insights. This is not the Nobel Prize. If you are familiar with the IG Nobel, these are for ideas that are a little ahead of their time, let's say. But this is already gaining momentum. And as you can tell, this is why I'm going to tell you how to be lucky. Because if you want to drive your results to the top of this power curve, then learning how to be lucky is the key. We invest in our talent endlessly, which is fabulous. But have we ever spent time talking about how to invest in our luck? Well, probably not, because we think it's random, like that just happens to us, right? But that is not exactly true. So these mathematicians and physicists, they went even a little bit further, and they said the combination that produces the top 2%, the people who have outsized results in our world, they are not just a little bit lucky, they are moderately talented. It means they're in the middle of that normal distribution. Average, moderately talented, and magnificently lucky. So you can see, given this conclusion, that starting to invest in being lucky might be kind of worth a little bit of time and attention. Now, there was another gentleman decades ago, Richard Wiseman. He wondered if there were any differences between people who are lucky and people who are unlucky. Like, is it something about the people? And so he concocted an experiment. He called in people who were self-proclaimed lucky and self-proclaimed unlucky. Like, I live under a dark cloud routinely. And he gave them each a newspaper. And he said, your job is to count the number of photographs in this newspaper as quickly as possible and as accurately as possible. Now, when I read this research, here was the eye-opener for me. Like, I'm behaving like an unlucky person. And not only that, but all of the elite institutions, professional training that I had received put me into that category of being unlucky. So I was like, I have something to learn here. Because here's what Richard discovered. When a lucky person got that newspaper, here's what they did. every intention of being focused and really fast at counting the photographs. Page number 1. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 photographs. Oh my gosh. Look, there was a fire downtown. I wonder if anyone got hurt. What happened? The lucky people start reading the articles. And they get distracted. So now they're realizing, oh, the clock is ticking. That's right. I'm supposed to be counting photographs. We'll have to get back to this article later. They flip to page 2. On page 2 was an enormous headline. It read, "You may stop counting photographs. There are 43. So the people who are lucky are like, hello, is this correct? Am I finished? Like, yes, you're finished. Pretty much took you about 3 seconds and perfect count. Excellent. The unlucky people tackled this task exactly as I would have been trained to tackle it. All right, I'm only counting photographs. I'm ignoring everything else. So 5 photographs on the first page, 3 here, 4 here. Keep a mental tally, keep adding up. What Richard discovered is that people who are unlucky are overly focused. They have like a tunnel vision. They're not noticing anything else about their surroundings. And if you think about it, like, we actually laud this behavior, this way of being, because for the first group, we'd say, oh, they're just being distracted. They're not on task. So he started to see true behavioral differences between these two groups. And his conclusion was that lucky people are curious, resilient, they believe they're lucky, and they trust themselves. And more than that, Richard discovered that he could teach people how to be lucky. So in quantum surfing, the first thing we do to start surfing quantum waves is we learn to be lucky. Now, I had a student in one of my courses say, how long, Monica, will it take before I'm lucky? I was like, what a great question. I'm like, I hadn't really thought about that question. And I said, I'm guessing about 2 weeks. And then, easily by 2 weeks, people were coming back to the course, like, I don't know how to turn it off. I was like, do you want to turn it off? So these shifts can happen very, very fast. So in the spirit of Richard's discoveries, what I'd like to offer you today is a reflection on being curious. So if we go to the next slide, because this is a workshop, maybe we call it a surf shop. I would like you to take 2 minutes now and jot down for yourself. When you leave this conversation today, how will you be more curious? Will you perhaps launch an experiment for yourself, like my son, who decided to become rejection-proof in this crazy manner? Will you perhaps listen in on conversations that aren't meant for you, but you have the idea that there's going to be something said in that conversation that's important for me? When someone is chatting with you and you have the opportunity to share, will you share, or will you go a step deeper with them and ask them another question? There's lots of ways to be curious, some more intentional than others. One way that is shared in the research is that if you walk into a room and you find that you always feel a little awkward, walking into a room of people that you don't know. You can simply choose a color before you walk in. And you can decide that I'm going to talk to every person who's wearing red. That's my mission in this gathering today. That type of curiosity, that playfulness, that openness starts to put you into a space of being engaged with and experiencing your world, which is exactly what the lucky people were doing in Richard's experiment. Because think about it. That newspaper headline was there for everyone, but only the people who identified as being lucky saw it. So this is not about changing your environment. This is about becoming engaged with it in such a way that you're noticing things that you didn't notice before. Now, why would we even have to do this? Because the brain optimizes. The brain uses a lot of energy. And it likes to be a bit fuel efficient. So you have to let the brain know that you want to notice some things that it's currently screening out for you. Because the brain has deemed that it's not important for your survival for you to know these things, for you to notice. But to be lucky, you need to start noticing. So another thing that you might do is jot down your lucky moments. Okay. So how can you be more curious? Right? Hopefully in these few moments here just now, you've jotted down a handful of ways that you'll leave here today and try on curiosity. When I was pulling these slides together, I was really reminded of that vignette from Ted Lasso. It keeps playing over and over in my feed. Maybe it's just come to me. But they're in the bar, and there's this challenge to play darts. Is anyone familiar with this scene? Aaron, you know it. And Ted ends up just sweeping. And he uses the last moments to explain that if his opponent had been more curious, that he would have learned a lot more about Ted. He would have learned that Ted went to the bar every weekend with his now deceased father and played darts. So it was just this beautiful moment. If you have a chance to see that vignette, I highly recommend it. Plus that whole series is just one gem after the next. All right, so curiosity. You're already on the road to being lucky. Let's look at what we're going to pull from Quantum Surfing 2. This is when we're balancing on the board. In Quantum Surfing 2, we're going to talk about intuition. Intuition is not something we are trained in. And it's an incredible power. Every single one of us has it. The best approximation that we have for intuition is what people call a gut feel. So people often say, yeah, I had a gut feel. But a gut feeling is not quite the same as intuition. A gut feeling typically comes from a survival instinct or a lifetime of expertise that allows you to be a pattern matcher. And so when you see a new pattern emerging, you're like, I've seen this, I have a gut feeling about it. Very important. But that's not the same as intuition. So I got an introduction to this in kind of an unusual way. I was on this quest to understand how reality works. Just a small quest. And I was chatting with a friend of mine, and he recommended his coach. I said, terrific, I'd love to meet your coach. So I did a session with this gentleman. Now, English was not his first language. And so at the end of our session, he said to me, when do you feel to meet next? I was like, what an odd way to ask that question. We don't ask that question that way. Like, when do you want to meet next? What works for you to meet next? When do you think we should meet next? No. He asked, when do you feel to meet next? Now, I think that it's a language issue. So I do what we all do. I pull out my calendar. It's packed, of course. And I'm looking for a place to meet next. And I want to keep these conversations on track. I don't want to allow too much time to go by. So I'm kind of optimizing for these considerations. And I choose a date and time. And he says, that's wonderful, Monica. Is that when you feel to meet next? I was like, oh my gosh. He actually meant to say feel. I said, I'm sorry. I don't know what that means. What do you mean, when do I feel to meet next? And he says, like, when do you feel? What feels right? I said, I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to look at my calendar and have a feeling about it. He says, Monica, just try. All right. So I sat there. I sat there trying to find a feeling about a calendar. And I got this slight glimmer. This almost like very subtle feeling of coming into alignment. And I said, okay. I suppose if you're asking me, when do I feel to meet next? It's not then, it's another week later. And it's not on Tuesday, it's on Thursday. And it's at this time, not that time. And he says, wonderful, we'll meet then. I said, I want to be perfectly clear. I do not want to meet then. It does not fit in my calendar. It solves for none of my objectives. But if you're asking me, when do I feel to meet next? That's the best answer I have. He said, wonderful, we'll meet then. Now, this is a form of intuition. I call it sense decisioning. I hope that you'll play with this idea when you leave. I have tried it in many situations. There was one morning I was in Palo Alto and I had to go up to Tiburon, California. And if you ever drive that corridor, you know that it can take anywhere from an hour to 2.5 hours. And I was feeling a bit stressed about getting there on time. So after feeling agitated, I said, enough, Monica. I got myself ready, all ready to go. And then I said, when it's time to go, you will feel that it's time to go. So I continued my work at my desk, and then I got that bing, that feeling. I was like, oh, there's a feeling. Okay, well, it must be time to go. I get in the car, and I'm like, oh my gosh, you've got to be kidding me. I don't have enough fuel. I have to, put more gas. So I had to stop, and the trip went this way. I pull up to my destination in Tiburon, and the clock clicks over to precisely being on time. I was like, this is strange. But I've shared this with people who've taken quantum surfing. They get exactly the same results. You have a knowing that is simply a way that you are already communicating with your environment, and launching these small experiments is simply a way to start to train yourself to turn on these subtle senses. So this is what this coach really taught me, is to feel rather than think. And that's really the key question. So, point number 2, we've already talked about being curious. To tap into your intuition, simply substitute thinking questions with feeling. Like, do it in all sorts of ways. What do I feel to wear today? Who do I feel to talk to? Who do I feel will be able to help me with this challenge? Over and over and over. Simply ask yourself, what do I feel? And your answers and your inclinations start to come from a different place. So this is a power that you can turn on. It's available to you, simply never taught. And I invite you to have a lot of fun with it. All right. I want to explain a little bit about the architecture of our multidimensional quantum reality. I don't want to go too far into the detail here, but I want to give you a sense that why would it ever be possible that you could change your behaviors and be lucky? Why would it ever be possible that you could ask feeling rather than thinking questions and get answers that are right for you? And that's because we live in a world of energy. And the reason I call this curriculum quantum surfing is because we are always surfing waves. Energy is in waves. Okay? So let's take a look at the world of the possible, which, good news, we've already all arrived in the world of the possible. So as you know, quantum surfing is a revolutionary method for actualizing a sea of potential. Now, because I'm a computer scientist, I like to think of things in terms of architectures. This clarifies for me a model that I can then simplify. So, the operating system of our world is the infinite sea of potential. That's the truth. It's the bedrock. Many traditions have different words for this sea of potential. The Akasha, divinity. People have tapped into this and had an awareness of it for a very long time. What I want you to remember is only one thing. This is the operating system, and the truth of it is there is no separation. Anything that appears as separation is illusion. That includes time. Time is a form of separation. That includes effort. Everything that we perceive as separation is part of the game. But the truth of the operating system is that there is no separation. That's why when you change your behavior, you can be lucky right away. Because it's about your energy. And when you shift into lucky behaviors, you are committing to the joy. You are changing your energy, and when you change your energy, you get a different experience. At the upper level is the game. That's where we live. Now, we experience life as being sequential, as happening to us, but I'm going to show you a model that might give you another perspective on that. As I shared, our quantum physicists started talking about a quantum reality 100 years ago. There have been phenomenal thinkers in this space. Erwin Schrödinger's wave equation, fascinating how he has described how energy moves. And his wave equation moves energy throughout multiple dimensions. And Hugh Everett, who was a physicist at Princeton, he then put together a model of a multidimensional experience. He called his model the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics. So we're going to talk a little bit about the game, because that's where we live. But in between the operating system and the game is consciousness. That is how we are communicating, sensing the infinite sea of potential, and even multidimensional insights. Because I am a computer scientist, I drew that for you in layers. But the truth is, it's much more of an immersion. Right? It's like the quantum, surrounded by consciousness, completely immersed in the sea of potential. Okay, here's how we experience life. We go to the tree. Okay? So, you may have even heard the tree of life. That's also in many traditions. We start, let's say, at the base of the tree. And then throughout life, we have choice points. And depending on the choices that we make, we move along the tree. And when we tell stories, looking back, we tell the story of the path that we took up that tree. Now, all the paths were available to us. All the paths existed. How did we choose? Sometimes we choose deliberately, and we certainly tell ourselves the story that we do. But in every day, we are choosing, and we are moving across potentialities. And we are choosing based on our energy. That is the number one way that the path gets constructed. This is why when you shift your energy, you shift your path. I would say that energy is like 80% of navigating, and taking choices is about 20%. And that some of the most powerful choices are inspired action coming from your intuition. So in Quantum Surfing 3, we're really combining these insights into a multidimensional, energetically driven quantum reality with traditional means of achieving success and outcomes. So I feel that the power is in the combination of the two methods. But when people start in quantum surfing, I really encourage them to put all the methods they know on the side so that they give themselves the best chance to learn and master an energetic way of being. This conversation would not be complete without a nod to neuroscience. So we experience our reality, our surroundings, based on this vehicle. Like, this is my way of getting around the world, you know? Like, walk along, wave. This body is constantly tuning into the surroundings. Tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of pieces of data are collected in every moment. Is it hot? Is it cold? Is it dangerous? Is it not? Is it, is that color? Because we don't take in reality. Our brain constructs that. Our brain takes all of the sensory data and says, what story am I going to tell her this time? And Anil Seth, who is a UK neuroscientist and has given a fabulous TED Talk and has fascinating research, would tell you that when we agree on the reality, we are having a shared hallucination. But how does agreement happen? It's because what the brain uses to decode all the sense information is your beliefs. That's the template. So the brain isn't going to give you a story that's out of line with your beliefs, because you'd be like, what? That doesn't make any sense to me. It always gets decoded in line with your beliefs. It kind of keeps us in a mental framework that's hard to escape unless our beliefs start to shift. That's why quantum surfing courses start with behavior change, because I have found it's the fastest hack to having new experiences and shifting beliefs. So, didn't mean to, thank you. So here, behaviors is where quantum surfing starts, by adopting lucky behaviors. Then what happens? When you try being curious, you get different results. When you have those results, in this case, it's a feeling of elation, like, you've got to be kidding me, this is possible? And then that shifts your beliefs. You're now experiencing the world in a different way. In the world of the possible. Then those new beliefs decode, and they lead to new thoughts, which then continues to proceed in this fashion. Other traditions start in other places on this cycle. Like meditation, for example, is really more in the thoughts space. Let's clear out the thoughts, let's meditate. Love meditation myself. But I also love fast results. And so shifting behaviors is the fastest way I have found to launch tiny experiments and start to shift beliefs to a set of understandings that's more consistent with how our world works. To tap in to the possible. So the neuroscience is important. We are only perceiving a small fraction of what is truly surrounding us. Right. So we're not all knowing. All right, so there's a little bit of the science. Maybe that piques your interest. And let's finally go into Quantum Surfing 3. If you were to go to a surf school, one of the first things they would tell you is where you look is where you go. You can't surf this direction by looking over here. You'll just fall off or you'll turn the board. Right? So where you look is where you go. Now, in an energetically driven universe, how do we look? And the invitation here is to use your imagination. You know, as children, we had big ideas, big dreams. We imagined all the time. In fact, I'm sure there's a few people in here who got chastised for being daydreamers. But actually, that imagination is a superpower. And this is an opportunity to tap back in to your imagination, because what you imagine is where you go, is how you're tuning the entire system. So imagination is truly a superpower. So just as we did with curiosity, I don't think I took a pause on intuition, so let's do that here in this moment as well. And I would love you to write down for yourself. How will you leave here and ask feeling questions rather than thinking questions for the intuition? And now in this moment, I'd like you to imagine and jot down notes for yourself. What lights you up? What brings you joy? Like inexplicably so. Like for me, I love the beauty of solving puzzles. That's what drew me to computer science. That's kind of an odd thing to love. There's so many things to love, that we live in a miraculous place. Right? There's dance, there's language, there's logic, there's investing, which is a whole other game. There's building companies, there's creating art, there's coaching youth, leading people, designing cars, fixing cars. I used to have a great relationship with my Carmen Guia. He would always talk to me. I'd get in that car and go, oh, that timing belt is just not quite on point. You know, these are weird things to love. But do yourself the favor of writing them down. I love the color pink. I don't know why. It just brings me joy. I love snorkeling in Fiji and the stillness of being underwater. I love kayaking when I can get out there and there's no noise and I can feel the wind. But for every single person, there are things you love. Don't lose sight of those. There's like clues in there to who you are and the magic that is an invitation for your trajectory. So allow yourself to imagine. So as you know, I'm Monica Laurence. I graduated from Bucknell in 1986. I'm so grateful to this university and this experience for setting me up on a trajectory of success. And while I've done many, many startups, now I coach innovators and entrepreneurs to be lucky, think differently, and surf uncertainty like a pro so they can have outsized results. Go for the win in success. Because this is what brings me joy. Seeing the potential and the dream of someone and being in the passenger seat while they drive to that destination, it's absolutely stunning. So that's what I am doing now. And I want to say thank you to all of you for being here this morning, for taking a leap with me that there's more for us than what meets the eye. And if there's any parting point I would like to share, commit to the joy, and here is to your luck. Thank you. Go right ahead.
I'm teaching a first-year class, and last night students had to present ideas for talks they're giving. And one of the students made the point that it doesn't seem like modern humans' operating system, she actually said operating system, is keeping up with the way that inputs are fed to us. And I thought that was so insightful, and it exactly aligns with, I think, pretty much what you're saying, right? Like, the operating system is the truth, it should be underneath, it shouldn't be something that we think is sort of up in the space of our perception.
Yeah. I know that my ideas are kind of, they're definitely leading edge.